Welcome to the Channel Experts panel brought to you by IOTA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. I'm Brian Sherman, Content Director for IOTA and host of today's discussion. And I'm honored to have such an experienced and well-respected collection of channel professionals joining me today. Should be a fun discussion. Our guests include the legendary Larry Walsh, devoted Rush fan and CEO and Chief Analyst for the 2112 Group. Ryan Morris, channel research guru and principal consultant at Morris Management Partners, and Dan Wensley, channel chief extraordinaire and CEO of Warranty Master. Welcome to the IOTA Channel Experts panel, gentlemen.
Hey, great to be here, Brian.
Thank you very much for putting it together, Brian.
Well, glad to have you all, especially. I know you're a captive audience this week in particular, but it's still good to have you on.
Government mandated.
Well, and I think we also, to be fair, have North America pretty well covered between Ryan on the West Coast, we have Dan up in Canada, and Larry on the East Coast, and Pennsylvania is somewhere in between. So we should have a well-represented group here, I believe. Anyway, let's get to the topic. We find ourselves in the midst of the global COVID-19 pandemic with over 400,000 recorded cases to date. And nearly a lot of people are in bad shape. I'll leave it at that point. This is obviously a serious worldwide health concern, which has led to a virtual shutdown of society, work, pretty much as we know it. We're reinventing a lot of things daily. So for many of us, business goes on. And the channel community is being called on to do some rather unusual things the past few weeks. We've seen a lot of people step up. It's been, I think, a tremendous collaborative effort in many cases, and the stories coming out of this will be fantastic. But with the panel's help, we hope to explore some of the challenges facing the MSP community. We're also going to talk about some of the latest research that Larry's group has developed, and we'll discuss some of the short and long-term implications from this global pandemic. Let's start with a status check. Ryan, how has the COVID-19 affected you personally? Is everyone in your family and work circle okay? We like to do a little check-in first.
Yeah, I mean, so far so good. We do have some very close family and friends who are hospitalized right now, but we're getting positive results on those things. Nobody in the immediate family has been affected, but you can imagine that travel has been cut out as we've been focused on that for the last few years. The first quarter this year was very busy right up until kind of the second week of March. And then Q2, there were a lot of events that were scheduled, obviously. We've had a lot of things that got canceled, a few that have been kind of proactively rescheduled into virtual events. But you can imagine it has been a very different way of doing business in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and you're kind of in the hotspot area too. You're over in the Seattle area, for those that are familiar too. You've had to deal with a lot right off the bat.
Yeah, well, what was interesting, I mean, back in January, we were in China for a client engagement. In February, we were in Europe. Actually, in March, we were in Germany. All of those places were having problems in the weeks after we were there. But we always kind of, wherever we were, we looked at it and said, well, maybe it's safer here than it is back home in Seattle. So fortunately or unfortunately, we got back in. Everything was smooth there. We did get flagged on the travel back in through immigration, and we got to be invited for special testing and screening, but everything came out fine.
Well, good. We're glad you're back. Larry, how about you and the 2112 team?
Well, we, much like Ryan, is that we spend a lot of time on the road with people. I think fortunately, my team and I we're all healthy. That's the good news. We first started, personally, I first started feeling the impact of this back in late January, early February. My wife is Asian American. Her family is in China and Taiwan. They were dealing with a lot of the early implications of this. So we were kind of seeing what was coming our way. We didn't, hoping the containment measures in China were going to work. It was interesting, as just as Ryan said, that it's surreal traveling for business. I was actually in Microsoft's headquarters the afternoon that they announced that they were shutting down their campus. I mean, somebody literally walked in and said, it was 4:30 in the afternoon. Somebody literally walked in and said, we're shutting down. And that was it. So we wrapped up our meeting and off we went. In fact, I met somebody else who happened to be in the Kirkland area. And as he's walking across the parking lot to meet me, he threw a bottle of Perel at me. And it was, yeah, it's like, hey, free Perel. In fact, there it is, same bottle. But it just like, as Ryan said, there's a lot of things that just happen quickly. I was in Manhattan on Saturday, hours before they locked down Manhattan. And it was eerie just walking around the streets with no activity, no cars, very few people. And the only reason I went in was because, you had a little bit of time left to get something done. I went in to help. We get a haircut from friends of mine who cut my hair just to help them out because they're going to be heavily impacted. We started talking with MSPs and partners as soon as this started heating up. I've been involved with, in conversations with several different groups of MSPs, talking with them, and it was interesting to hear them talk about what they thought was going to happen. They really thought that they were in a good position for all of this, and it just a short week to begin to realize the stress that all this is going to bring on. And I think we're going to see a lot of, we're only at the beginning of this, and it's hard to say that. New York yesterday, which was surprising, as Washington, the Trump administration is saying that, we're going to be out of this by Easter. New York is saying that we won't hit peak for 60 more days. And so that's an indicator. Now, are we all going to peak at the same time? Are we all going to be under the same social distancing conditions at the same time? Probably not. But that is actually not as good as, like, say, what India is doing right now. India is in full lockdown, trying to get the entire country out of the way, where we have pockets that will be rolling. That is even going to cause more disruptions throughout the year. So I think this is, we're still in uncharted water.
It's a fluid situation for sure. How about you, Dan? How are things in Canada and the Ontario area in particular?
Well, we're a global company with offices in the UK and Vancouver and Montreal. I'm very used to working remotely, running businesses from a home office and a ton of travel, like both of these gentlemen and yourself, Brian, and it's been an incredible time. We've moved, 60 some odd employees to remote offices, and as Larry's report indicated, we as an industry are pretty well, probably the best set up to take on this challenge of moving people remotely. We deal with 76 countries and partners all over the globe. So moving all my employees out of the office was relatively seamless, but it teaches you a lot. And most importantly, I think it's been having some empathy and understanding of what our partners are going through, what SMB is going through, to move to this new reality that we're in. So it was relatively seamless for us, but it had an immediate impact. And we're doing, I'm just amazed to see the response from the channel, our employees, certainly what they've done. They've been upbeat about it, and how can we help partners? And I'm thankful we're even having this conversation today, because I think, having these two guys on and talking about what's happening in our industry is critically important, and sharing stories, best practices, what we can look forward to, what we should be aware of, I think is the best we can do at this point.
Definitely, and I'm thankful for the IT professionals who support us too, because honestly, I've had a lot of help from my MSP partner who takes care of our systems and makes sure I can work well from home, as opposed to my other remote locations. So you get the fabulous background in here too for those who are watching on the video. Let's take a step back to it. Let's take a realistic look at the financial health of the IT services community and kind of where we're going to. Larry, 2112, it's not just financial, but I know you have a hot off the presses research on this topic, which is actually so new. I haven't had a chance to look through it. You sent it over earlier this morning.
It's okay. I wrote it and I haven't looked at it.
Okay. I kind of figured that. I've seen some of the things you've written before. That's fantastic. Can you give us a brief synopsis of the study and what the results were? Yeah.
So look, we have to frame this up properly, because this is a cascading effect. We're looking, if you read the economist reports, and I've been looking at reports coming out of the Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, they're all somewhat in agreement. But they're looking at anywhere from 13 to 25% GDP hit in the second quarter. I mean, that's not a decline. That is a crater. And we're beginning to feel that. I mean, so we fielded the survey last week as all of this was unraveling. And we got some interesting feedback saying, okay, it's a little too soon for this. Well, we thought it was important to capture a snapshot in the moment so we can compare this as time goes on. We had a baseline going into 2020, and we have to say all of those expectations and everything that we were forecasting in January is now gone. We have to set to new reality. So the new reality is that as of last week, 37% of vendors were seeing that we're already seeing a decline in orders, order cancellations, and slow pace. And surprisingly, I agree with Dan, is that we are an industry that's really well set up for dealing with remote workforce. But even in the vendor community, 23% were grappling with trying to transition to this work from home. Now, going into the new year, we had a really relatively optimistic outlook of what 2020 was going to be. Most of last year, we were hearing about a recession forecast, which would be a normal downturn, which we haven't had in 10 years, a normal downturn sometime in Q3. And they were predicting anywhere between plus or minus 1% GDP, which was in economic terms is a really mild recession. The channel was going into 2020, 76% were expecting channels to grow by 6% or more. And that has inverted. 83% are expecting the economic health or economic outlook to decline significantly. 47% are saying significantly. However, this is the good news. I mean, all of this said, because again, the framing is important. All of this says 42%, actually it's more, 58% expect to hit or exceed their 2020 initial forecasts. All right, so 42% are saying plus or minus 5% of their original forecast. 58% are saying they're either going to stay where they were or grow, which is incredible because everyone is now expecting to catch the wave on the other side of this. So what we're calling beyond the curve. Beyond the curve, we're looking at an 8 to 10% GDP growth in North America, which should recover most of what's lost in Q2 because Ryan said it, we were observing it as well. Great Q1. Q1 was going fantastic. I was talking with one channel chief who said that in Q1 they saw a 9% increase in deal registrations. As of the second week of March, deal registrations started declining 30%. So it is episodic, but it's a long episode. And the good news is that we do see that there's another side to this. And correspondingly, the vendors are not cutting budgets yet. Most of the vendors are either maintaining their sales, marketing, and incentives budgets where they were at the beginning of the year in anticipation of being positioned on the other side. So overall, we're going to feel it. It's going to hurt like hell. But we are not, so far we're not seeing an overreaction, even in the peak of everything that was happening.
That's fantastic. Where can listeners or those that are viewing the podcast go to learn more about the research, Larry?
They can come. We're making all of our 2112 is making all of our COVID research, the COVID impact research available for free on our website, 2112.com. Right there. But just come on. It's right on the homepage. It's in our research library, and we are going to be adding a steady cadence of temperature checks. No pun intended on COVID testing, but seriously, is that we need to see how this unravels. We've never seen anything like this before. We have nothing to compare it to. We are dedicating our research efforts to making sure that we capture as much of this data as we can.
Fantastic. Thank you. We'll also drop that into the notes for the podcast and for the webcast too. So for those that didn't catch that, they'll find it afterwards. Ryan, let's shift to you. What are your thoughts as far as observations you've seen too? I know you gave us a little bit up front, but what are you seeing? What are you predicting?
Yeah, I would echo two things that Larry said, and then kind of take it into an operational sense. Where you are service focused, the impact has been less severe because budgets have been staying reasonably consistent. I don't expect that there will be a steady state through all of this stuff. I think everybody's budgets will go down at least temporarily. Where you are focused on product hardware especially, The disruption to supply chain is one thing, and the disruption to orders on the demand side, that's another thing entirely. We recently hosted an advisory panel with 5 different vendor channel leads, and every single one of them had supply chain disruptions. They were varying degrees, but they were very significant, right? Like we were looking at not being able to get equipment into the channel for as much as 2 to 3 months once the ordering started again, and that's completely independent of some of the impact from the demand side. I would absolutely say there's going to be an impact, but I totally agree with where Larry's going from the optimism second half of the year. I think it's early. We don't know what the impact is going to be necessarily, but it is super smart for Larry to go out there and capture a baseline today and then come back and follow up on that stuff later. I think what we will learn is that we are not nearly as in control of this as we think we are. Managed service providers, contract revenue, monthly recurring revenue, that's been kind of a gospel in our industry for about 15 years. And I think it has worked well enough that we've gotten just a little bit comfortable in the assumption that, well, I have a contract, so my revenue is not going to go down. Yes, it will. There will be reductions in staff, and per seat license fees are going to decline. There will be people who cancel contracts. There will be people who continue contracts and simply don't pay for those things. There is absolutely no business model that's going to be completely immune to this, but this will be an absolutely incredible value to learn how to manage through difficult times. I know all of us that are on this call right now, we've been through this before in the industry. We were all there in 2008 and 9 when the industry had a different and a less significant crash. It was still very significant, and we're going back and relearning a lot of those lessons. This one will teach us some new lessons, and I think it's going to be extremely valuable. From an operational point of view, I am absolutely convinced that we are underestimating the impact on revenue, but I will advise people to do what Larry said, and please don't cut your staff. That's not just a philosophical observation, right? The process of recruiting, onboarding, training, and getting back up to capability after this happens, if you slash your staff today and you try in 90 or 180, maybe even in 9 months, if that's when you start recruiting again, it takes 3, 6, 9 months to restaff an organization. And those who are able to cling on as much as possible to their current staff are going to be in a much better position to reignite once this thing comes back out on the other side.
So Brian, can I just expand on something Ryan said?
Sure.
So we're already seeing and hearing from MSPs that they're getting some contract cancellations that are hitting their recurring revenue. Now, initially, that's only the weaker of their clients. They're using this as, I hate to say using as an excuse to get out of their obligations, but it just happens to be that this is giving them a little bit of air cover. Prior to all this happening, though, we were catching wind from some pretty significant large GSIs and regional integrators dealing in services contracts. There was a growing bubble in the recurring revenue model. And it's being caused by the vendor side. And we have an analysis on the 2112 site that talks about this, where vendors are forcing partners or requiring partners to get into long-term services contracts that either have per seat minimums or non-transferable licenses, and because they want to have that stability to report out to the street and report back to their PEs. And the prediction is that the reason why these partners were coming to us with it was they felt that the vendors were unfairly putting risk onto them. And if there was ever to be an event where you have an economic downturn, then it would have a cascading effect through the partner community. Well, now we're going to see if that's true or not. And we're already hearing that is true now. And so there are a lot of vendors out there that don't have restrictions on license transferability or capacity transfer. There are some vendors that don't require partners to buy into even multi-year contracts, but even those are in 1-year minimum contracts getting hit now. If they start seeing customers, either slow pay or fall off, they're going to take a significant hit. And the vendors are going to have to adjust for that, because they can't afford to see their partners get weighed down by arbitrary obligations.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely a learning curve. Dan, I was going to say, Dan, do you want to weigh in on this from the vendor's perspective?
Well, the one thing all of us on this call certainly know, being in the channel as long as we have, is change is constant. Certainly not to this degree, but as Ryan alluded to, I'm going back to my notes from 2008, 2009, which was really at the genesis of the managed services evolution that we went through as an industry. And I remember having conversations with partners back then who were canceling their RMM and their PSA because of the downturn. They said, look, we have to make this change and cut costs. And it was very short-sighted. I know many of those partners today who took longer to come out of that recession than arguably others who stayed the course the best they could. I couldn't agree more with Ryan about not getting rid of staff and training, and the knowledge and capability is going to be needed on the downslope of this, and it will take you longer to ramp up. I will tell you that the partners, both Larry and Ryan spent a lot of time with large partners and large vendors from a emerging vendor as we are, and where I've spent most of my career. The majority of the MSPs we're talking to go down two tracks. It is shelter in place and take a defensive, and there's others who are taking, I don't want to call it an offensive, but a proactive view of this opportunity in markets. And I don't use the word opportunity loosely. I mean that if you're going to best service your customers, you need to adapt to the market we are in, the conditions that we are in. If you stay the course on traditional, what Larry had in his 2112 report, the outlook for 2020 was absolutely stellar. A few of us were concerned that we were ready for a downturn in the economy globally, but generally the outlook was fantastic. We will not stay on that course perpetually, and there was going to be a shift and change. Now, it is catastrophic what has caused this one, obviously, but look for ways to help your partners and your customers adapt. I mean, that's what we're focused on, quite honestly. My business is very different, frankly, this week than it was last week. The nice part is we have opportunities to help partners in other areas or unexposed areas that they hadn't been looking at. I will tell you, at Warranty Master, our warranty procurement business has gone up immediately. Where, as Ryan said, there's going to be supply chain degradation and delays. What does that mean? Well, that's shifting to warranty, where I had a lot of partners, just to get down into the weeds a little bit, not taking advantage of extended warranties and the value and the services and the security. They've now seen that as, wow, I can help my customer this way. And can we lower CapEx cost or operating costs in another method? And I'm really talking to partners who have two philosophical differences. One, shelter. Two is, how do I help my customers get through this and manage this?
And I think if you look at, I got to give Joe Panettiere due here too. Joe had mentioned and has been talking about pivoting. And I think as of last week, we saw a lot of partners pivoting from sales and marketing first to, going back channel with that. And basically, what can I do to support my clients? What can I do to protect my employees? And also positioning. What can they do also to make sure their financial situation is in order? Ryan, why don't I shift to you with this? What steps should MSPs and IT service providers take right now to strengthen their financial situation looking forward, so that, when we come through this, they're in a better position to retain their employees, as you talked about before, but also to kind of ramp back up and hopefully capture some of the revenue that they may be losing right now or may lose?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I would say I have heard from some people who are doing this very well in real time, and I would echo it completely. Number one is that you have to shore up whatever existing business you have. Dan's exactly in the epicenter of that, right? If you have existing equipment, make sure warranties and support contracts and everything is current, and make sure that software is on maintenance. Make sure that everybody has access to continue to use the tools they have, because that has a direct revenue impact on people in the channel. The second thing is make sure you take advantage of whatever good credit and lines of financing that you have available. There are a lot of people in the channel who tend to be financially very conservative, and they need to be willing to open up a bit, take a risk a little bit here, and take on some debt, be able to utilize some of their credit facilities, because right now the interest rates are incredibly low, and you have, based on past performance, probably access to more credit today than you will have in a year from now. Utilize those facilities and make sure that you, even if it's just to hang on to the liquid assets so that you can be ready to invest and go forward. But I think where Dan was going is also something that's absolutely critical. You can't stop doing business during this downturn. There will be fewer opportunities. There will absolutely be a different way of connecting with and communicating with our customers. But if you stop selling today, and your customers are going to believe, well, maybe they went out of business. Maybe they just aren't around anymore. One of the biggest lessons that we learned coming back out of that 2009 timeframe was that companies that maintained and then invested in a sales capability were much more rapid to recover afterwards. Most MSPs, right? We grew up in a world where I signed a long-term contract, I got to enough contract recurring revenue that I could cover my operational nut, and I stopped investing in marketing and sales because I was comfortable, I was fine, I didn't need anything more. Well, there's never been a contract written that couldn't be canceled for whatever reason. And we've been preaching for years, never let that sales muscle atrophy. And that could not possibly matter more right now. If you don't know how to market and sell 3 months from now, you are going to get left behind as this economy starts to ramp up again. And every one of those contracts that you've counted on, those long-term business relationships that have been around, if they went away, if they declined, you have to go back out and replace them. And God forbid you live in a world where you personally haven't been on a customer sales call in a year. Well, we have plenty of contract revenue. We don't need to be out there getting new customers. We need to fall back. Man, coming back into that sales game is going to be a very painful process for people that don't maintain the sales muscle.
Brian, I have to say, this pains me because I loathe agreeing with Ryan. Look, I think that one of the things that the MSP community is discovering is that backup isn't just about technology. One of the questions I asked, I was on a call last weekend with a group of 50 MSPs coming together, trying to, just sharing. And I asked the question, so what's your contingency plan if your capacity is sapped? And they go, oh no, we're backed up on everything. I'm like, oh no, what happens when your people get sick? What's your contingency plan for coverage? And they don't have one. To Ryan's point, we as an industry, and I mean, this is not exclusive to the partners, this is also to vendors. I mean, I know Ryan probably sees this as much as I do. They're very tech focused. They're not sales organizations. Let me share a couple of stats with you. 47% of solution providers do not have a business plan. 57% do not set sales goals or have a sales plan. 72% do not have a marketing plan or marketing capacity. That's the state of our business. And so people had said like, oh, you know what? I've actually had solution providers and MSPs say to me exactly that. I'm done selling for the year.
Well, my God.
And I can, and we can, they start sharing numbers with me, and I can start doing the math in my head. I can say, hey, you stopped selling in June. Oh my God, how'd you know that? Well, it's magic in math. And you can calculate all this and when they stop doing certain things based on what their comfort zones are and based on what their experiences are. And to Ryan's point, it's not just that they haven't been on a sales call. They find sales distasteful. But we are going to need to have sales and marketing capacity. And one of the things, I agree with what Ryan was saying, focus in on the customer experience, talk with customers not just about what their tech needs are, but what their business needs are. And we have new research coming out that we've paused because it everything going on, but on the impact of influencers in the market, it is incredible. And solution providers are as much a part of the influencer community as anyone else. And they need to leverage that and make sure their customers are having a great experience. And nowadays, translating great experience into operational effectiveness. But also get in line now on aid. I got to tell you, we did the same thing. Like if, 2112 is just like any other business. The first thing I did as soon as New York was declared an economic impact area, we put in for our SBA. We put in our SBA application. I am here to tell you right now, it is a pain in the ass. It is an antiquated website. It is overwhelmed with traffic. The information they're looking for is not always readily available for most of these guys. If you don't know what your numbers are, you don't keep good records, you don't have a plan, you're not going to be able to get through that process very well. And if you're going for other types of aids, particularly through banks or other lending institutions, they're going to want to see a business plan, not just to see your tax records and your financials. They're going to want to see what the hell you're going to do with the money. So now's the time it's no longer a choice. You got a gun to your head. It's time to bone up on your business acumen.
And we certainly did a stimulus plan here in Canada, Larry, but it pales in comparison to the $2 trillion that was just approved by the Fed in the U.S. I mean, the zero interest loans, the opportunity to maintain that there is a downslope to this, and there is going to be impact and opportunity and spending going on coming out of this, and I couldn't agree more. I think the dirty word for our channel and our industry has always been sales. We're talking about it here today. This is all about, in my opinion, communicating with your customers. For us, it's communicating with our partners. For our partners, it's communication with your customers. If you're going in to sell them something, the appetite for that is absolutely zero. 99% of the case, they do want to get communicated. The IT industry is critically important to coming out of this and even operating through it. Zoom is, allowing us to do this. I can't, Microsoft Teams has had to have more sales in the last, 72 hours than they have in their history since launching Teams. So there is areas where we need to focus on, and IT in this time is critical. And I think we're the IT professionals, we're the channel, we're the ones supporting the largest impacted community, which is the SMB, other than obviously individuals and families. But when it comes to business, it is the SMB. It's been good to see the assurance that the SMB is what drives the global economy, not just the US, not just Canada, North America, but SMB is the global economy. And we're on the front lines of that.
Yeah. And Dan, to your point, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry, I was just going to jump in there and say, temporarily there is opportunity, right? Larry, I noticed a thing you put out yesterday, just a quick thing from the Technology Distribution Council, right?
Yeah.
Frank was talking about how distribution is a vital piece of the channel, and there are fulfillment and operational capabilities in place today. I would wager across that segment, distribution is going to have one of their best quarters ever, because they are sold out of laptops. They are sold out of wireless APs. They are sold out of a lot of that inventory that's necessary to facilitate remote working. When the entire world said, hey, you must now shelter in place and work remotely, the four of us on this call, we were like, okay, cool. That's what we've been doing for 20 years, right? That's absolutely not the case for almost all of our customers. And it is not the same. It's not a sales pitch when I call a customer and say, how is your team being impacted? Are you going to be forced to work remotely? Do those people have laptops? Do those people have a VPN in place? Do those people have sufficient network bandwidth to be able to do their jobs effectively? That transformation process in a very short window, it's a tremendous opportunity. It is not a sales pitch, right? I'm not here to say, would you like to buy a laptop? I'm here to say, how can I help you stay in business? Larry hit it directly on the head. What is your business continuity plan? And I don't mean storage, right? What is your ability to continue to operate as a going concern? All four of us have said from a stage, from a webinar at some point in the last 30 days, as well as the last 10 years, if you don't run the business like a business, there will be a reckoning. You will have a very difficult time thriving into a challenging environment. That's where we are right now. And so we have to be able to make changes that are going to be short-term painful, but long-term have value. If you actually provide something that is valuable to your customers, right? If right now, I remember 15 years ago, Larry made a comment at a conference that we were at where he said the conversation started with almost every customer is, yeah, whatever else is going on, how confident are you in your security? Because everybody needs better security. Now, if you are a managed security service provider and you can get your customers up and running in a secure fashion today, that is not me calling you and saying, would you like to sign up for something? That is saying, I provide something that is legitimately valuable, mission critical, even for customers. Please do not go into a shell and prevent your customers from getting access to that stuff. If you provide something of value, now is exactly the right time to offer that value to your customers. If you don't provide something that's that critical and that important to your customers, that's a whole other issue.
One area, I know I've talked to several MSPs over the last week, 2 weeks. I know things have shifted a lot in the last few days, but they're figuring ways rather than putting people on unemployment, especially their sales team, they're redeploying them because what they're really good at is communicating with customers, and then they understand their markets, is having them reach out and kind of be triage for the support teams. Put their marketing team to work on creating messages to help on the support side. And then also even using both of those groups to leverage and go, what things are we going to need when we get out of this? Creating content, writing blogs, those type of things, but redeploying the current staff, keeping them on, retaining them, looking at the financial resources that are available. To Larry's point and Ryan's point too, is there's a lot of loans becoming available, and there's a lot of financial things available, but really they're not letting those key people go, and they're utilizing them as much as possible to communicate with end customers. I think that's a value that the successful MSPs are taking advantage of right now.
I would add one thing to all that, though, is that, and I've given this a lot of thought. I am one of those people. If you follow me, you'll hear me say this whenever people start railing against evil corporations. I'm the one that tries to explain to them, okay, that's not how this works. The money that people think are locked up in business vaults really isn't there. It doesn't work the way they think it does. But I think it's incumbent upon business owners, particularly our businesses, whether we're talking about our vendors, our distributors, or the partners, and frankly, even ourselves. Let's not think about profit right now. We'll have plenty of time to debate the policies, figure out how to come out of this on the other side. But if we start killing jobs because we're trying to maintain some arbitrary profit ratio, then we're going to kill ourselves in the long run. This is, and I think that's one of the things that concerns me going into the second quarter and people looking at this GDP hit. You got these particularly publicly traded companies that are worried about their PE ratios. Let's not worry about that. We'll forgive you later on. The market will forgive you. We all know the market's going to come back. The market will probably bottom. We're not done on the roller coaster. I've seen some numbers that say the market will bottom somewhere around 14 or 15. Which would be about the same rate that it bottomed out in 2008, relatively speaking. Let's not worry about that. We're going to buy your stocks. We're going to buy your products. The market's going to come back. Let's worry about keeping people employed, because if people are employed, then they will have money to spend. They will not stop paying their mortgages, not stop paying their rent. They will keep on their service contracts, and we will get out of this faster.
You're right, Larry. I mean, the end is in sight. It can be seen. Unlike the economic downturns, you don't know what's going to be the trigger to pull out of that. You can watch CNN and figure out what the trigger is to pull out of this, and we're seeing it on a global basis. I mean, I would be hiring. I am hiring right now. I would love a few vendors in some of my office locations to let go a few good channel people. Call me. I will hire you immediately, because as Ryan said, people are the cornerstone of our industry. We're in technology, but it is the people who can help partners and customers that drive the business. And, we're going to be retaining all of our people, and I will hire anybody who has an opportunity to come talk to us.
Yeah, right. Dan, I'll tell you is that the reason why I applied for the SBA loan, not necessarily because I need it, but because I had to put 3 open recs on hold. And if we get that funding, what am I doing? I'm hiring 3 people. not only retaining staff in place, but hiring 3 more people. That's how we do this.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And see, this is the thing, right? I don't have a crystal ball to be able to predict when this thing is going to turn around, but I can.
Ryan, you've been telling
with
the
confidence
industry
that
for
it
20
will
years.
turn around.
Haven't you been telling the industry for 20 years you've got a crystal ball? I've been relying on that.
I kind of thought, yeah, me too.
I thought Ryan had a crystal ball.
Well, so
Dan, he does have a crystal ball. It just pales in the comparison to Tiffany's tea leaves.
Good point.
Wow.
Apologies to Tiffany Bova.
Yes, and an incredibly accurate comparison there. What I will say absolutely is this will come back, and businesses are living entities, right? Like, you must continue to invest, you must continue to operate, and it is your ability to communicate with a steady confidence that things are happening and that they will continue to happen that gives other people confidence around you, right? Not to get too Rudyard Kipling on you here, but if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, et cetera, that is the way forward, right? We were at a conference in Germany and doing a workshop with regional sales leaders. They have staff, they have people, they are trying to figure it out. And the message that I wanted to make sure everybody understood was urgency versus panic, right? Yes, something needs to be done. There are very many bad options right now. There probably aren't any good choices, but you can still make good decisions among bad choices, right? You need to make those decisions now. Don't go into hibernation mode and get scared of this world. Those who can keep their heads and continue to operate are going to be the ones that are positioned for growth. And that comes down to your ability to run the demand side of your business, right? Larry's exactly on target. Right now, you have to preserve your capacity. You have to make sure your staff is still here and healthy and operating effectively. That's how you survive. When you turn out of surviving back into growth mode, that happens on the demand side of your business. And if you don't have a demand engine, then you're going to spend a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out how do you build a sales process overnight? You don't, right? Like, now is the time to get ready for that stuff. Of all the things that we've been tracking, right? Larry was talking about some shocking percentages of people who don't have business plans, don't have marketing plans. When we did research 2 years ago on looking at kind of structural capabilities, less than 7% of channel organizations have what we would refer to as a sales engine, meaning a non-quota bearing sales manager, a defined sales process with an assigned sales goal, right? If you take those 3 elements and you put them together, that's what we would call a sales engine. Fewer than 7% of channel companies have that. If they have anybody in place leading a sales organization at all, it's probably the boss, or it's probably one of the sales reps who happens to be a bit more senior than others. That's not going to scale, and that's absolutely not going to be enough to get you back into a healthy operating mode. That's the number one request that we've had in the last 30 days is, how do I build a sales engine? Everybody is in that position. And I mean, it sucks that we are here in this situation dealing with such a tragedy, but I really hope people take it as a wake-up call that says, we've been saying this for years and years. Some people have listened and they're doing well. Other people have not listened to that and said, like Larry said earlier, oh, no, I'm good. I stopped selling in June. I'm fine. I'm comfortable. That's not okay.
Yeah.
There's no better time to be proactive. And that's the one thing we've talked about in the channel forever is being proactive. Excuse me, strategy or strategery, however you want to use it, is we really need to, as an industry, be more proactive and be ready to locked and loaded for, when everybody can come outdoors again and play and get back to work. There's going to be a lot of work to do. And rather than focusing on those few exceptions, there's going to be companies that fail and don't pay, but focusing on those that do and what you can build and generate revenue is going to be, I think, key for the next few weeks for MSPs. Let me do, because we're getting close on time. I could talk to you guys all day long, and I'm sure our listeners wouldn't mind, especially you guys. But let's do a quick go round. Final thoughts, takeaways. Why don't we start with you, Larry, because it looks like the mic is on you at this point.
Oh, well, okay. I'm giving a keynote, which was supposed to be live. Tomorrow I'm giving a keynote for an event that was supposed to be live, which is now digital. So that's going to be fun. But they changed my topic from, how to grow to how to survive. And I came up, I went looking for something inspirational, and yes, because I do presentations with cliche quotes. I learned that from Ryan. But I found one I think that is appropriate for going through. From John Dennis, life is not always a matter of, and we have been dealt a shitty hand. And there's no thing it's offended anyone, there's a lot more to be offended by. But this is the truth, is that we have got ourselves into a jam. We can bait everything that led up to this later. Your head politics, keep your head out of the blame game and figure out what it's going to take to get the next 6 months. We know that there is a curve. And and truth is that that we're going to have to endure the pain. Otherwise, we're going to endure a lot more pain. That's the trade-off we're in. There is no upside to any of this, other than once we get to the other side, it's going to be better, and we know that already. So that's why I say play your poor hand well, because that's it's the only thing you can do at this point.
Yeah, and great quote. Except I kind of thought you would have something from Rush for me. I'm a little disappointed on that part, but.
Well, unfortunately, and Dan will attest to this, is that unfortunately a lot of Rush's most applicable quotes for this occasion are more about individualism, which I don't think is what we're in for now.
Right. Excellent point. Dan, why don't we shift to you? Final thoughts.
Well, I'm sure Larry will agree with me that Fly By Night is the best Rush album of all time, but I realize he couldn't name his company that, so
I'm a Moving Pictures fan, but that's just
Wait a second. So I'm going to break in here. So Fly By Night, Dan. Brian, you said Moving Pictures. Ryan?
No, Moving Pictures was the first music on LP that I ever paid my own cash money for in my life. So I'm hardcore on that one.
I'm with you, Ryan.
I'm sorry. Even though my company is named 2112, the best album is still Permanent Waves. So we can continue on.
All right. Very good. Dan, after that, pressure.
I'm contemplating that. I think two things for me: communication and pivot. We can't do anything without the conversation, without communicating with our partners, with our customers. That's first and foremost. This is changing so rapidly that anything you may even hear on this podcast could be impacted tomorrow. So I think keeping the communication, pivot the business, and continue to invest. I think there is stimulus packages there for a reason. Take the opportunity. Don't lose your staff. If anything, reinvest in them, because they're our greatest asset.
Fantastic. Mr. Morris?
I would say earlier we made the comment that the people are kind of the key to this whole process. You have to make sure that your staff is still around. I would also observe one of the most important lessons that we learned in the previous recession was that the difference between companies that thrive after a difficult period versus those that do not come back strongly, it's down to the individual decisions, right? It's not about what business model you run. There is no perfect technology that you could sell that will guarantee your success. It is entirely about the decisions you make as an individual and how effectively you and your team are able to operate. I'll give you a reading assignment, right? A book that I came across coming out of that whole process, 2009 and 10, I became absolutely fascinated by the difference between the companies that were doing very, very well after and those that were not, and trying to really parse and understand. There's a book called Choke. It was written by a woman named Sean Baylock, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Since then, she's gone from being a researcher to being the president of Barnard College, so a reasonably credible individual here. It's one of the best books I've ever read about the way that individuals can operate under pressure. I know this is hard. I understand that everybody is scared. I understand that the markets are freaked out and that there are no good decisions. But that doesn't mean you can't operate effectively and come back out the other side. The difference between success and failure right now is, quite frankly, going to come down to you. It's an individual thing that you have to do for your team to make the entire system work more effectively. That book is, if you got some downtime while you're not sitting in traffic commuting to your office these days, read that book. It is an absolutely fascinating study on the impact of pressure on how people who can usually perform very well when it's the bottom of the ninth and there's 2 outs and 2 strikes. A lot of people, they choke. And yet there is a way to learn to do better in those situations. Read it, apply it, do those things.
Fantastic. Excellent advice. On behalf of IOTA, I feel really privileged to have the guests that we had today. I want to thank Larry Walsh, Ryan Morris, and Dan Wensley for such great expertise and advice too. I think what we've talked about today is really where many MSPs should be looking in the future too. For those of you who are new to the podcast, be sure to check out our library of channel-related web panels and podcasts. It's iota.com. I want to thank you all. Wish you a happy day, safe day, and by all means, if there's anything you need, please feel free to reach out to our team. Thank you so much.